Welcome to the Intuitive Websites Internet Marketing Podcast, bringing you the country's top podcast on the subject of internet marketing, with your hosts Glenn Thayer and the CEO of Intuitive Websites, Thomas Young.
Well, folks, welcome back to another podcast. Tom and I are ready to go, and one of the things that kept coming up when Tom was doing his speaking engagements all around was, should your website meet the needs of all visitors or only focus on your target market? Now, before we had talked about eMiniMind. We did a site review of eMiniMind.com.
That's right.
It was a couple podcasts ago. And we did get we got a response by somebody else. Can you pull that up on the?
Sure, it's listed on the actual blog as a response.
So if you go to intuitiveblog.com, and we're going to pull that up in just a second here, and then you can see it yourself as you listen along. And we got a response on that from another day trader talking about how eMiniMind dialed it in, that it is specific to day traders, and if you don't know day trading, then it doesn't apply to you.
Yeah, so it was from Jim. And what's interesting is if you go look at Jim's comments, I've actually heard this before in many different types of website presentations and in working with clients. And so, there are some kind of rule of thumbs around this. And I guess Glenn and I can just give you our input and our feedback and what we think would work. The bottom line for websites is you want them to be a sales and marketing tool for your business, or at least that's the focus behind what we do. So, if you remember Seinfeld, remember the sitcom Seinfeld, if you remember the one episode with the soup Nazi.
Yep.
Remember the soup Nazi? It's real interesting that while I was writing the outline for this podcast, my son was watching that episode, and I thought to myself, a website that doesn't engage with visitors and doesn't relate to visitors is kind of like the soup Nazi. Now, he had great soup. He had great content. He had great soup, okay? But he couldn't relate to his visitors. And what ended up happening, if you remember the end of the episode, is Elaine, one of the characters in the show, gets rejected, doesn't get soup, and then comes back and steals his recipes and puts him out of business. So the moral of the story is you can't, even if you have great soup, if you're going to be a soup Nazi, you're going out of business. So I kind of relate it the same way to these websites. The websites have to relate to the website visitors, and I think that you want to put a broad net out there and a nice broad spectrum of content so that everybody gets what you're saying on your site. In fact, we have several rules that we talk about. We talk about the 10 out of 10 rule, which we mentioned in these podcasts, which is we want 10 out of 10 visitors to come to your website and understand what you do and be able to refer that site to other people and make a decision for themselves. Do they move forward and contact you or they don't? And the other thing, other example I give is, what if Bill Gates is on your website? And that's what can happen with the web. Very important people can stumble across your website. And Bill Gates, this is an extreme example, but Bill Gates has a foundation where he's awarding, thousands, if not millions of dollars to different organizations that he stumbles upon. Well, what if the right person stumbles across your website? You want it to be understood by everyone.
Well, and it's really easy. You mentioned that, Tom, that you have folks that say, well, you know what, I only want to go after my target market. My target market, that's it. If you're not my target market, you're going to show up on my landing page and you're going to not know what the heck you're doing.
And people have told me, if they're not my target market, I don't want them on my website.
Right. But here's the other part. Why did they show up to your website?
That's right. What was their intent?
Because clearly they're not going to be putting in your website address. I think very few people, depending on how you're marketing. But if you're marketing and somebody put you in and they got there because they saw a billboard or something, you're still not doing a very good job of reaching your target demographic. But
exactly right. And you can watch things on your website like your bounce rate. Okay, that really tells you, is the right person on the website or is the website understood? But I just think that, number one, capture as big a marketplace as you can. And number two is your website can be a referral source.
Well, it can be simple. You show up to the website, and you go to the web page. The landing page should clearly outline who you are and what you do. And it doesn't. And then it's very, very clear whether or not your target market is going to engage. Because if somebody shows up, says, "Okay, what do we do?" We can pull up an example right now. xmatters.com. That's what it is. xmatters.com. Ran into these folks earlier in the week and their company and had no idea what they did. And they are the what do they call them? The relevance engine company. And I don't have a clue what that means.
Yeah, this site is an example of design and branding that's gone overboard. And what I think they're missing is that they're not a household name. They're not IBM. So you can't assume people know who you are and what you do unless you are an IBM or an Apple. And so because they're doing that, they've got a great design, they've got great messaging as far as from a look and feel, an artistic standpoint or a creative standpoint. But when it gets down to the nuts and bolts, people just will not understand what this website does. And they probably have a fairly decent, pretty high bounce rate, or they have, it's kind of ironic, but they probably have a very low relevancy rate, meaning people come to the site, can't figure it out, and then leave. So what this site needs, especially on the landing pages, the home page, very clear, direct messaging so that 10 out of 10 visitors understand what they do. And then once you go into the internal pages of the site, then you can get into the most technical jargon you want, because at that point, you're assuming that visitor is showing a high degree of interest. They're much more segmented or targeted, and they can read the details about what it is you do. And one of the things that to keep in mind too is even in a site like this or a technology-focused site is what is the reading level of the average website reader, website viewer. And that reading level needs to be at the high school level or lower.
Well, I think it even depends. It's even less than that. They were talking about, I want to say something in marketing. They said you need
seventh or eighth grade.
It's not even that. It's like a fifth grade level is what you have to write content or copy for.
Well, it does a couple of things when you do that. Number one is you're not assuming that your website visitor is stupid. You're assuming that they're busy, because content that's easier to read can be scanned and read in a shorter amount of time. That's number one. And then number two, you're speaking more in a language that's common to everybody. And if you keep it at that lower grade level, then you have to avoid using terms like on X Matters, the relevancy engine, mass notification, user community, CA workload automation AE. These are just cryptic terms that are the internal language of this company that no one is going to understand. But if you write at that lower level, then it forces you to say, hey, a mass audience is going to get what we do. And whether or not they're your actual target market or your actual segment, they can refer people to you, and you make life easier for people that are in your target segment.
I mean, and the simple thing with this is I think I have a pretty good idea of what X Matters does. Is it's more of a contact type engine. If there's a problem at your company, let's say an alarm is going off, it will contact the right person.
Yeah, from what you were telling me, it's almost like they do alert management.
It's like alert management.
Or, crisis management.
Yeah,
kind of
and
stuff.
If there's a problem, if a server goes down at your office, it contacts the right person to handle that. Yeah. Instead of contacting the IT manager, it contacts the person that's just responsible for the servers.
Yes.
And if they're not available, it contacts the next person. So it goes through, and it would be easy. It's like, hey, contact the people you need when there's a problem.
Yes, absolutely.
And instead of saying, what if there wasn't chaos when there's a critical event? Well, to the majority of people, we don't understand what critical event. I'm thinking an accident, car accident or something like that is a critical event. Or
one of the terms that I like to talk about is the term mass media or multimedia. What do those terms mean? I mean, what do they mean different things. If you got 10 people in a room, you get 10 different answers to what the term mass media means. But if you say video or if you say an audio, that's much more clear and direct.
People get it, and it's simple. Now, do we have another site we can look at?
Well, Delcor was a site that we looked at, and this is delcor.com. And what Delcor does is they're just a little bit more clear than X Matters. They're still a little bit, if you look at the homepage, it's just a little bit challenging, but you do see technology, consulting, network systems and support, and you see a blogger summit, which probably is a meeting of some kind. So it's much easier to start to get a sense that these guys are doing technology consulting. And then if you click on who we are and how we help, you start to get it in a few seconds of what they do. Whereas X Matters is just a lot more challenging to try to figure that out.
So what really? If you look at it from a standpoint, should we be focusing on just a target market? Or should we be focusing on everybody?
Well, and I've thought a lot about this. So this is a very important point. If you're listening to these podcasts, take this note down. The way to determine how you segment your site is really determined about how much you alienate a marketplace. So I want to take a look at E-Trade. E-Trade, in the most valuable part of the website, the upper left-hand corner, they have 3 major tabs, and the eye is immediately drawn there. New to investing, experienced investors, or active traders. So if you came to this website and it was only focused on new investors, you would totally alienate experienced investors and active traders, right?
Absolutely.
And so you don't want to do that. You don't want to have sites that alienate a segment. When you do that, then you either have to clearly break it up in your navigation system, or you need a separate domain name and a separate brand, a separate focus. In this case, E-Trade can keep the same brand because it's all trading, but they've basically said, look, if you're top of the line active trader, you don't have to mess with the newbies. You don't have to. We're not going to insult your intelligence and show you the stuff for the newbies. We're going to take you right to the heavy hitter stuff, so you can jump in and do what you do best. So think about that way. Think about the answer to that question. When I land on a page that's a broad page like the home page, am I alienating people by showing a certain thing on this page? And it's very easy to do this if you have a broad segment, like if you're going after teenagers and then the elderly, like Apple.com. He's got this issue. You don't want to alienate folks that are in their 60s and 70s by showing them stuff that would get a teenager excited, even though you might have the same marketplace. So you have to find ways to segment those out.
So wouldn't that be an easy way to do it, is just come up with several microsites?
Microsites is a way to do it, especially if, different products and services, different landing pages. The way E-Trade did it here with breaking folks down into these 3 segments, all of that is really good. And if you actually click through to these pages, like new to investing, I believe you're going to keep the same navigation structure. So you're really not, the website's not changing that much. It's just a focused area for that specific marketplace.
Now let's take a look at Unilever for a moment. It's unilever.com. And
nice design.
And they have tons of brands. Now, nobody's going to go, not nobody, but most people are not going to go to unilever.com to find out information on some of their brands. Now, Unilever has several brands that they represent. Now, Unilever has its own, and then you have food brands, personal care, home. Let's see, what are some of their brands, that their main ones that everybody? Lipton is one of their brands. So Lipton tea that people are familiar with. You can go to Lipton, and then it showcases kind of what Lipton is. Now,
yes,
Lipton is going to have Lipton's going to have their own website.
They are, and this Unilever site is probably more for investors or for their global partners and things. Yeah.
It's the global website, the main website, and Unilever's saying, here's who we are as a company, and here's all the brands we represent and that we have under our umbrella. And then they have microsites, or the individual brand sites for each one. Yeah,
and that's a good way to do it. And you're not going to see the personal care stuff show up on the Lipton tea website. So, that's a good approach to this, is just keep in mind, are you alienating a person by, if they visit that page, are they going to get turned off? And if that's the case, then you got to start segmenting your website.
Well, here's a prime example. You're looking for Lipton tea, and for some reason or other, Google hits Unilever. You show up at Unilever's site, all you're trying to find is, where can I purchase Lipton tea?
That's right.
And you show up at Unilever's website on the main site, are you going to be able to navigate to the Lipton site from there?
Yeah, and I think that what a user, understanding user intent, of course, is critical in website marketing. And understanding not only the intent around the segmentation, but why they're really coming to your website is critical. And the solution to that is that you've got to understand that just because you get it, like the X Matters people, just because they get it on their website, doesn't mean anybody else gets it. In fact, what probably is the case is they nobody else gets it. Even in personal communication, this has been proven over and over again. You can be talking directly to someone, and they're only understanding a small portion of what you're really trying to get across. And so the solution to this is to have a broad net, keep it simple, communicate in very direct, clear, concrete terms that mean the same thing for 10 out of 10 people, and then get into much more in-depth knowledge and so forth as you go deeper in the site. Now, a national brand like a Nike or an IBM or an Apple, they're so well known they can play all kinds of games with branding and photos and images and stuff. But for the most part, the average business out there can't do that. You've got to be clear and direct and focused.
So is there a middle ground that we can find?
Yeah, and I think once again that the way to find the solution, the middle ground, whatever it might be, is to do some user testing. And we've talked about that in other podcasts, to speak to your target market, to speak to potential referral sources, and to try to get people to really open up. And I think once you do, you'll realize that people really love simplicity. It's a breath of fresh air for them when things are easy to use or easy to navigate around. And so if you can do that on your website and still connect with your market segments, then you'll have a winning website.
Yeah, and you mentioned it right there, user testing.
Yes.
And that is the 10 out of 10 user testing, and you'll know whether or not you're good. Now, aside from the landing page, and you start dealing with target market, then you do your user testing for your target market, and you need to have 10 out of 10 in your target market.
Yes.
Get it.
That's right.
And that's a totally different story. You have a different marketplace, but then for your internal sites, you got to have 10 out of 10 with your target. And then I think you'd be good. Do we have any other wrap-ups? I know we kind of went through a whole bunch of our key items already, our key action items for our listeners, but do we have anything else you want to add, Tom? Anything else that our listeners should be taking away?
There's one more website that we can talk about. It's Accenture.com, and we'll post all these on the blog as well. But this is a B2B company that if you look at them, you might think, well, what the heck do they do? Their name doesn't make any sense. They don't have a tagline. But they do an interesting thing on their site. They talk about results that they've gotten for their clients, and they're very specific in their results. And so if you don't know who they are, you immediately get a sense of, well, they work with big companies, and it looks like they help these companies save money and be more effective. And then you can click on About or Latest Thinking, and then pretty quickly, once again, you can understand what it is they do, and they can reach 10 out of 10 people. So if you did user testing sessions on this website, it would probably just take users 15, 20 seconds to get it and understand they're a global consulting firm working with large corporations.
And that would be something that you'd look at from a standpoint if you're a small business, though. And this is probably going back as an aside. As a small business, I would look at this going, I would never even contact these people because they wouldn't work with me.
Yeah, because you can see they're working with huge companies. But you can do this on your website. You can put in here, the money that you saved a potential client, the money that you've made to a potential client or a current client or customer, the value, the benefits, all of that is highlighted really well on their homepage.
So go take a look at it. It's Accenture.com, and you can kind of get an idea of what we were talking about there. Well, any last-minute thoughts, Tom?
No, I think that about covers it. I think that this is more about, in a lot of ways, this podcast is more about the actual website builder's perception of the world and how they want to approach customers and communicate to them. And it's also a little bit of watch out for your ego, because your ego will want to dominate and say, I know the way it goes and it should be this way. And if you don't get it, then forget you. And, you don't want to be that strong ego, kind of the soup Nazi kind of thing. You want to be more of let's connect, let's communicate. And if you can do that, then the website will be more effective.
Well, folks, you heard it all. Thank you so much for joining us, and be sure to tune in for our next podcast.
This has been an Intuitive Websites Internet Marketing Podcast. For more information and to see all the available podcasts and much more, visit intuitiveblog.com. If you have a website you would like us to review or an issue you would like to see covered in future podcasts, email us at info@intuitivewebsites.com.